I'm Jeanne Robinson. I was born Jean Evans in Southend-on-Sea on March the 23rd, 1930. Well, I started at John Dickinson's when I was 16. I left the Hemel Grammar School and came straight to work here. And I've been with John Dickinson all the rest of my life. Well, it was just after the war. In fact, it was the war in Europe was over, but it had just finished in the Far East. But there was still a lot going on in the Far East, and the army was still out there for a long time. So things were rationed. Paper was rationed. We could only make a small amount each quarter. There was not much in the way of design, of course. It was just really basics. And then, of course, food was rationed. Excuse me. We used to use the canteen in the Guild House, but that was just a very basic meal each day, no choice at all. And after that, we used to walk down into the village and look at the shops and see. There wasn't much on there, but there were a lot of shops, and I think possibly Dickinson's kept the shops going. There were chemists and ironmongers and grocers and greengrocers and haberdashers, and you know, sort of you get most things that you wanted there that weren't on ration. The newsagents, that was quite a big draw, and yes, and if you didn't go there afterwards, you used to walk up to Shendish and have a walk through the woods and spend a bit of time there till you got back. After you had an hour at lunchtime. Yes. When the 12:30, just before the hooter went, we were allowed to go from our workstations and make our way nearer to the main door. And the big set of steps at the main door were absolutely filled with people, all standing with cigarettes in one hand and the matches in the other, desperate for a cigarette because you're not allowed to smoke in the mill at all, yes. We'd had 10 minutes up in the cloakroom to clean ourselves up after our work in the filing department where I started. And we had to take our own soap, that was rationed as well. In fact, bread was rationed for the first time after the war. It hadn't been rationed at all during the war. We had the national loaf, which was rather grey sort of colour. There was no choice whatsoever. But we were used to it, I suppose, and we just got on with it, yes. And then in 1946-47 we had a tremendously bad winter. There was snow on the ground from Christmas 46 into the end of March 1947, and the Dickinsons had their own powerhouse. It was a huge heap of coal, and that all just dwindled down to nothing, and the factory had to close. The office had to go in at 9 o'clock when it got light, and finish at about 3:30, 4 o'clock when it got dark. And we sat there with our coats on, and we were allowed to wear trousers, which we weren't normally, and sat there with our coats and blankets around us and get on with our work, because I suppose the paperwork was still coming in, although the factory wasn't working. So that was a bit different. And then when we finally got home at tea time, there was sort of a couple of knobs of coal in the grate, and we'd have a meal and then go to bed about 7:30 because it was the only way to keep warm. We had oil lamps because there was very often a power cut. You could be cooking something and the power would go off and it would be half cooked and sort of all wet in the middle, you know, it was horrible. But we were used to it and we just got on with it. Yeah. The day I started in September 46, my friend Pauline started with me. She came from Aston Clinton, and we became lifelong friends, and until she died we were, you know, very close friends. And I think that quite a lot of friendships were made in work, and a lot of marriages as well. It was quite a marriage bureau, you know. Miss Clark was in charge, and of course all the senior staff, you were Miss and Mr. We just got delivery of this object which was called a sortograph, and it was a U-shaped table. Miss Clark sat in the middle and there were files either side, and she put all the papers into rough order, and then her girls had to sit at the desks and put them into strict order. And then after that we put them away in the filing cabinets, and the stationery carpenter had made little stools for us, so we sat on the stools for the bottom drawers and stood on the stools for the top drawers. There was also a John Dickinson school, and Pauline and I used to go there one day a week and learn shorthand and typing. And then in 1947 I moved up into the filing, from the filing into the typing pool. But in March 1947 many of the army soldiers came back. The Navy and the Air Force had been back quite a long time, Jeanne Robinson and Dick Cass came back from the Far East, and they had 6 weeks leave and then just got on with it. There was never any sort of talk about what had happened. They never mentioned all the awful things that they'd seen. The filing shared the ground floor of the stationery offices with the stock section, they had a power SAMA system. I never got to really see how it worked, but it was sort of cards with holes in. It was supposed to be the forerunner of a computer, and they did all the orders and that sort of thing from there, filled all the orders in. Yes, and that was on the ground floor. Then on the middle floor there was the typing pool and the factory office, and the production manager and his secretary had offices there. And on the top floor there was the main office with 2 managers and 2 secretaries' offices as well. And yeah, we got to know a lot about the factory. I feel that we had a good grounding. It was a great way to learn about the products and things. I mean, later on in the years when I was there, people would come in from outside or from university, knew nothing about things, got full of bright ideas, which of course were no good at all. I think it was a great way to go through the company from bottom to top, really, and you know, learn about everything. And also parts of the factory. We were sent on errands through the factory, collecting phone money from the factory workers. They were allowed a private call if absolutely necessary. And we got to know all the back ways, and also the other departments as well, you know, get sent on errands. So it was really very interesting. Yeah. In 1948, I got engaged to Jeanne Robinson, and then in 1949 we got married. I had to leave work because they wouldn't allow husbands and wives to work in the same department. And so I moved to book department, and I stayed there until I left to have my daughter Sally. And then I had 5 years off, or more was it, till my son was of school age, and then I went back to stationery department because they'd relaxed all the rules. And there I stayed until I was made redundant in 1980, when we say 82. Yeah, so it was, you know, about 30 years or more service there, yes. They had retirement courses up at Chendish, and they all had these courses for men, but then because there were a lot of women retiring, and they said, well, they didn't hear anything about what the women were going to do when they retired, you know. So I got roped in to go. We'd have a day up there and talk about everything that was going on in the town, and things like U3A and that type of thing that you could join and, you know, really get involved in. I think they thought that the women were just going to go home and look after the house, you know, the garden. But times had changed. Probers was a big thing in the town, yes. And when some of the managers retired, they used to have a monthly meeting at a pub, and they called it the Last of the Summer Wine. And they used to ask the wives at Christmas time, and then it got so that there weren't very many left, and it got a smaller group, and so the wives used to mostly go as well. And you did an interview with Jim Crotty, didn't you? And he used to go. His wife had died, and then when Alan died, he used to pick me up because he lived at St Albans. And then after he wasn't able to drive, I used to pick him up and take him. so you know, the connection's gone on a long, long time. The daily routine in the filing was sort of get there, and you each had a section of the alphabet to look after, and you got all of your papers ready from the day before to file, and you got on with the filing. And then, as I say, we went on messages and that sort of thing. When you got into the typing pool, you were more or less stuck there typing all day long, you know. You started on, they called them extracts. You got an order came through and the stock wasn't there for all the orders. You had to extract what was able to be sent, and the rest was put by till it came into stock. And that was the first job that you got. And typing factory tickets, which were horrible. They were foolscap length. The top copy was a shiny pink paper, so the carbon didn't cut through, so you had to do the top copy and then you had to do 6 carbon copies underneath. Very boring it was. Oh, we had a Gestetner machine which you had to copy things off onto. And then you progressed a bit and you got onto letters. And so then that was the next. I can remember the senior typist, it was Doreen Havard, and she used to do the typing for John Turner, and nobody else was allowed to type for him. Well, many years later I became his secretary. So that was good. Nice man he was. And yeah, so we used to get a cup of tea in the morning and a cup of tea in the afternoon, and then, as I say, we had an hour off at lunchtime. We finished at 5:30 at night, and the factory finished at 6. That was the thing with the rush to get across the road at lunchtime. I expect you've got photos. Hopefully they haven't all been destroyed in the fire. This rush across the road, it just stopped the traffic both ways, and the buses were all lined up, and there was the Bream, which was a little private bus as well, and took people into Apsley and to Bovingdon, I believe. And yeah, it was a good family business, really. I think the atmosphere was quite good. The stationery department was built right by the canal, and it was by the powerhouse, and it was sort of partly out over the water, so we used to get rats come in. Well, under the floorboards. If one died, it was absolutely revolting. And they couldn't get at them, you know. Oh, this awful smell. But yes, I don't know what year it was, but we had the new factory built. Frank Burtonshaw, who was the production manager, he designed and planned the whole of the factory, and that was on the Bellswain side of the canal. And we got a lot of more modern machinery, and the lorries came in at the back of the building, bringing in the reels of paper, which were then converted into pads and envelopes. And I was in the new typing pool for some time, and then I was promoted to secretary to the production manager, Frank Burtonshaw, and I thoroughly enjoyed that job. You used to get involved in the factory quite a lot. We had new machinery. There was one very big machine which was called a Schoen press, and that came from Germany, and that automatically cut the envelope blanks, which previously had been done all by hand. We had two men with a pile of paper, and they had to place these metal blanks in place on the paper, and then the press would come down, and it was all done by hand. It took a long time, but this Schoen press did it automatically, and it turned itself round and cut it all out, and that was interesting. Yes, I say, I got to know all the different people in the different departments. There was after the paper came in, it went into the mass production, which was the pad room. There was the box room, and then there was the envelope room. We had our own carpenter's shop, we had our own engineer's shop, a sample department. It was all sort of, each department in the mill had its own sort of little headquarters there, really. Some years later, Mr. Burtonshaw got sent to South Africa to take over the production of the factory there. I mean, we had factories all over the world and all over the country. I think it was the biggest paper makers in the world at the time. And so then Dave King came in. We had a household department which was based at Tottenham. He'd been running that department, and he came down and moved into Hemel and took over the production manager's job there. And then after some time, he got moved to the new office upstairs. I can't remember why, and Alan Jakeman took over, and I stayed with him until I was made redundant. I loved the job, but I felt that things weren't being done the same as they had been, as I'd been brought up to do. And I felt a bit, and I think my husband felt the same. It was a bit, you know, a bit more slapdash. And so when in 1982 there was a large redundancy in the factory, so I did all the paperwork for that, and then my name was added on the bottom. And then at the Christmas, Alan was made redundant, so we had a nice long retirement together to enjoy ourselves. It was a good life, yes. I think most people enjoyed it being down there, yes. Because there was a nurse and a doctor here all the time. Well, the doctor came, I think, 3 days a week. The nurse was here all the time. And when you were employed, you had to pass the medical test to make sure that you were suitable, you know. Alan and I walked home from Shendish one night, and I was absolutely covered in gnat bites. And I went into work the next day, and my legs and arms were all these bright red spots. And Mr. Richardson, who was in charge of the stock section, said, "You go down to the nurse and get those seen to." So I came back, and I looked worse than I went, because she put calamine motion on them all. So I looked as though I was infected, you know. But yeah, they were good. When we got onto the new factory, the nurse moved over there, and I got quite friendly with her. On one occasion, she rang me up from the time office at Bellswains Lane, and she said, "I'm going to be late coming in." She said, "Will you cover for me?" Because she said, I was getting ready to come to work, and I'd left my skirt off and just went round in my pinny. I took my pinny off and forgot to put my skirt on. So she got to work and she hadn't got a skirt on. So she had to ring from the time office and go back to Abbots Langley to get her skirt. But yeah, they were good fun as well. We used to go out a lot all together, and then of course the Guild House, we had the dances nearly every week. Each department had their own dance. The first dance that I went to for stationery department, after Pauline and I started, we had to wear these hats that they made in the sample department, like a soldier's hat, with Basildon Bond on the front, and dish out all the programmes. And you got first choice of your own department's tickets, and then after that was a rush to get other departments, you know, they sold very quickly. It was very, very popular. And again, their buses were put on at night, about 11:15 it finished. And buses into Kings Langley and Apsley and Hemel and Bovingdon, you know. They really did look after you, I think, you know. It was like a big family, really, yes. After the war, when things started getting a bit better, and plastic came in, and we had a plastic section in this stationery, and it was called the Plycraft section, and they made the plastic wallets and hard caskets for the stationery, and that eventually went up to Liverpool, and we had a bigger section up there. But I don't think that lasted all that long. I think other firms probably took over and it wasn't worthwhile. But so we had a very diverse amount of goods going out, really, you know. When you look at it, the whole of Dickinson's, you know, we covered every bit of paper that you could think of, really. But Alan was promoted to, they called it initiation section, and he had to buy all the artwork for the brieflets and the box tops and that sort of thing, papers for the boxes. And so he used to go all over the country sourcing that. And we got friendly with quite a few of the artists. One in particular, Mary Brown, she did these beautiful flower paintings. And yes, it was very interesting. I could thoroughly say I enjoyed my job, yeah. Because Shenges was very popular. I mean, it was a beautiful place. It had wonderful gardens. There was a beautiful rose garden at the back, and immediately behind the house there was, they called the Dutch garden, which was box hedging in sort of Dutch pipe shape, filled with tulips in the spring and forget-me-nots, and then geraniums and things in the summer. There were 6 lawn tennis courts. There were 4 hard courts. So Pauline and I joined the tennis club straight away. In the front of the house there was this beautiful bowling green. It was Cumberland turf, which is apparently the best. And so that was used all the time. And they often had county matches there because it was so good. We used to have, well, we spent a lot of time there. At the weekends you could get afternoon tea. That was a round of tomato sandwiches, a piece of fruitcake and a cup of tea, and that was a shilling. And then afterwards there was a bar, but that was men only. And if you wanted a drink, the women had to go to a hatch in the corridor, bang on the hatch, and they'd finally come and serve you. Very, you know, very disgruntled, really. But of course that eventually changed. So we got one-armed bandits in there as well. We used to have outings amongst our groups. I mean, we used to do theatre outings quite a bit. We'd pay each week and save up until we got enough, and then we'd book the theatre and go out to dinner, you know, perhaps a dozen of us or so. Yeah, I think we really enjoyed ourselves, you know. Made the most of what we had. When we heard that the new town was coming, we were horrified. But I think it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. But of course, then you got an influx of the people from London, which stopped the village feel. The shops were good, and the Marlowe's was, you know, a good shopping centre and a nice market twice a week. But then that's gradually disappeared, and I mean now you know all the shops are like there, opticians and estate agents and not much else really. But well, it was a long time. I mean, I've seen a lot over a long time. We did keep in touch with quite a lot of people. Edna well, Miss Clark became Edna, and then Edna became Auntie Edna to my 2 children, you know. And I was in touch with her until she died. She'd retired down to Devon, and I did get to see her in Devon when we were on holiday. I was on holiday down there. And then of course Pauline was my best friend really, and I had Sally 3 days after she had her daughter Linda, so I mean we were all very close. Yes, and then there's lots of others that we kept in touch with over the time, meeting up and on the phone, you know. But of course a lot of them are gone now. I mean, like Jim Crotty, you know, who I got quite friendly with, although I'd known him when he was financial manager. But yes, and then Dick Cass, of course, he finished up as director, but he had been my husband Alan's friend since they were 4 years old, so I mean they were our nearest friends really. Yes. Pauline and I were playing tennis up at Shoendish, and Alan, he lived in Apsley, and he used to walk up to and have a look at the tennis, and then of course we were working in the same room, and we gradually got friendly, and as I say, we used to spend a lot of time at Shoendish, and we'd walk home from Kings Langley, he'd see me home. It was double British summertime then, so it was stuck till it was light until about 11 o'clock at night, and then after that we got bikes and we used to cycle everywhere. Oh, and I know what I've just remembered. The Shoendish had its own bus, which was like a little shooting brake, and I think it took about 10 people, and we used to wait at the bottom of the drive, and then when they got enough people in, it would drive you up to the house and then come back again. So if you hadn't got a bike, or certainly people didn't have cars, rather than walk up the drive, at least you've got a lift up there, because it's quite a long way. And then of course the other thing about the men-only business was the billiard tables. The women weren't allowed on the billiard tables. I heard a rumour that they thought that we would tear all the bays, I don't know why. But it went on a lot like that, men-only things, you know. Yeah. Gradually all changed. It was a good life really. But then there wasn't a choice in the town, you know. It was sort of Dickinson's or Kent's, or the men used to go to the Hemel Engineering, and there wasn't much else, you know, unless you went in a shop, there wasn't much else to do. And for some reason my mother didn't want me to go to Watford, which would have been easier, you know, on the bus. So yes, it was sort of Hobson's choice really.